Alien Isolation, the digital series, by Fabien Dubois, combines gameplay footage and cinematics from the game with new scenes. It makes the Alien story accessible to those who don't game or struggle with stealth gameplay. Instead of an 8-hour playthrough, this mini-series condenses the story into 7 episodes, totaling an hour and a half. The story centers on Amanda Ripley, Ellen Ripley's daughter, from the original Alien film. Set 15 years later, Amanda is contacted by Weyland-Yutani Corporation. They've recovered the black box from the USCSS Nostromo and invite her to join a mission to the space station where it's held, offering her a chance to uncover the truth about her mother's fate. However, her search quickly turns into a struggle for survival against a familiar xenomorph, hostile androids, and a race against time. So, in this video, we will explore all 7 episodes of the series, followed by a crisp review. Let's begin, shall we? Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
My God, Ripley. You're doing good, Tim.
Episode 1. The first episode begins with the same sense of horror, claustrophobia, and paranoia that's usually associated with the Alien franchise, considered to be one of the best games from the franchise. We follow Amanda Ripley in an astro suit just floating in space. Around her is the debris of a recently destroyed spaceship. Additionally, in the backdrop, there's a large celestial body with its sun appearing as a diamond ring. You know, the same phenomenon that sometimes happens during a solar eclipse? Anyway, so we have got Ripley. That's what we're going to call her since the OG Ellen does not appear in Alien Isolation. Where was I? Oh yeah, so we've got Ripley here floating in space, and she is trying hard to get a hold of herself as well as the situation. But she is in zero gravity, and there's not much one can do when in zero gravity, right? But Ripley was her mother's daughter, and she used her thrusters to create some force to counter her free flow. I am sure you know how Newton's laws of motion work. Here's a quick science lesson though. So because she was already in motion and no external force was acting upon her, she continued to be in that motion. However, as soon as she used her thrusters, they acted as a source of an external force, which countered her present inertia of motion. I hope I did not sound very geeky. Nevertheless, she had just started gaining some control over her body when a large piece of debris floated her way. Poor girl could see it coming, but there was pretty much nothing she could do about it. I mean, she did try to defend herself using her hands, but the stuff just rammed into her head. I am surprised that her helmet did not break, because the momentum with which the floating debris hit her seemed pretty intense in magnitude. The way she did a 360 because of the hit must have been a real gut jerker, if at all there's such a thing. Nevertheless, she soon collects herself and tries to connect with the Torrens, requesting a lifeboat. I am sad that the poor girl did not see the first Alien movie by Mr. Scott. Had she seen it, she would have known that in space no one can hear her scream. Nevertheless, filled with hope that was fleeting away, she kept on trying to get a hold of just about anyone. She needed a lifeboat immediately, or else she would eventually die of starvation. She tried to broadcast her distress message. I am in orbit, extravehicular, no propulsion, around planet KG-348 in the Zeta Reticuli system. Girl was actually orbiting 348, much like the space station Sevastopol, which was the source of the debris you are seeing on the screen. I know all this seems like too much information, but it will all come to place by the end of the video. She was trying to stay awake and keep talking, because passing out would have spelled out doom for her. So, like any self-respecting astronaut in spinning and floating in space, she began to describe her story and how she ended up where she was. This is her story. Ripley was a skilled engineer, and while on a job one day, she gets visited by Samuels, a synthetic working for the company. He brings her news, telling her how the Weyland-Yutani thinks it has possibly found Ellen Ripley, Amanda's mother. She is initially cold to Samuels because she blames the company for her disappearance, but her interest peaks when she hears about her mother. She had always wanted to find out more about Ellen ever since she was a child. Samuels tells her that the flight recorder, or the black box from Ellen's ship called Nostromo, has finally been found, and that it was currently present in Sevastopol, a supply depot in the region, a permanent free port. He informs her that transit has been arranged. There was a courier ship named the Torrens that left Earth in the next 2 days. You see, Samuels knew that Ripley had been working around the same region where her mom went missing, so here he was allowing her to get what she had always wanted, a chance to know more and get some closure. A place at the Torrens seemed like a blessing to Ripley, and she agreed. We also learned that after Ellen went missing, Amanda's education, counseling, and even her bails were taken taken care of by Weyland-Yutani, which pretty much made the company the only thing closest to what you can call a family. Aboard the ship, we meet another Weyland-Yutani executive, a lawyer named Taylor, Englishwoman, not very happy to be on board because she was not really a fan of long-haul missions being a lawyer. It wasn't long after waking from hypersleep that they reached the vicinity of Sevastopol. However, Captain Verlaine found Sevastopol heavily damaged, so much so that even communications were down. Naturally, no contact could be established with Sevastopol. Needless to say, this was not expected and was most unusual, since contact could not be established with Taylor's contact Marshal Waits, Taylor, Samuels, and Ripley decided to spacewalk into Sevastopol. Oh, the spacewalk, because Captain Verlaine couldn't bring Torrens into Sevastopol, given the damage it had mysteriously sustained. Additionally, they were on a clock, because Captain Verlaine could only begin the spacewalk when their EVA line gets severed. The cause was debris from an explosion that had just happened in Sevastopol. Ripley gets separated from her team. However, she does manage to reach an airlock and gets on board Sevastopol. Episode 2. The second episode starts with Ripley still broadcasting her distress message. She had suffered a severe concussion because of the piece of debris that had previously hit her, but she was trying her best to remain awake by continuing to talk. Anyway, we move on to the main story, and we find Ripley has shed her spacesuit, but she is still alone, not having found Samuels and Taylor just yet. However, while exploring Sevastopol, she suddenly feels the cold barrel of a gun on her neck. Amanda was already in a state of shock and horror because of the things she had witnessed aboard Sevastopol, including a bloodied corpse. She grabbed a maintenance jack and was trying to open a door when she felt this gun on her neck. The owner of the gun was Axel Fielding, one of the survivors of the Sevastopol massacre. In truth, Axel had been stalking Ripley from the moment she set foot on Sevastopol. Seeing that her guard was down, he confronted her. You see, she was a stranger on Sevastopol, and Axel was desperately trying to find a way out. Amanda could have been her ticket out. In fact, she guaranteed him a spot on the Torrens in return for his help in finding comms, so that she could contact her friends and her ship. But why was Axel so desperate to get her out of the ship? Well, as you may have expected already, the killer was on the loose, and he did not want to be around when struck. That's all Axel tells Amanda, at least for now. Axel was initially hesitant and hostile, but eventually agreed to help. Poor guy did not have much of a choice anyway, so the two of them headed to find Seegson Communications. But on the way, they came across a bunch of extremely hostile and violent survivors who were concerned about missing supplies like food and weapons. They knew that someone else was active in Sevastopol, and they wanted to eliminate anyone they did not know. You see, more mouths to feed meant less chance of survival for anyone else. Anyway, Amanda and Axel snuck past these violent and armed survivors. Axel leads Amanda through multiple hallways, creaks, and crevices of the giant spaceship before reaching a two-man lock system. The two of them open the door and get through, but one of the survivors from earlier finds them. He tries to kill Axel, but Amanda comes to his rescue. As soon as Axel gets free, he shoots the other survivor down and claims that if he did not kill the man, he would have been dead himself. However, this alerted the other survivors, who fired at Amanda and Axel. Fortunately, the two of them managed to escape. Soon, they found themselves in a huge atrium, trying to catch a breath. Amanda asks Axel who or what this killer was, and Axel tells her that he has not seen it, but it has been taking down the survivors, one body at a time. It wasn't before long that Axel noticed some strange substance dripping on his sleeve. He checked it out and immediately knew that the killer he had been talking about and dreading was around. In a classic case of Xeno kill, Axel finds his chest impaled by the xenomorph's tail. Amanda is left in utter shock and horror. At the sight of this gruesome murder, she screams, but manages to hide. The xenomorph lifted Axel up and dragged him to a ventilation shaft, which shredded Axel's body because of how confined and small the opening of the shaft was. After this, the xenomorph came down, perhaps because it heard Amanda running to safety. However, the xenomorph could not locate Amanda, and she watched in horror as the biomechanical monster walked away.
No. Oh my God.
Episode 3. She managed to elude the xenomorph and watched as the beast slaughtered a group of Sevastopol survivors in the most gruesome of ways. After this, it disappeared into the ventilation system. By now, Ripley had seen a lot. Dead bodies, violent humans, evidence of vandalism, people running for their lives, you name it. She crept past dead bodies and headed to Sevastopol's communications center in the hope of contacting Taylor and Samuels. But instead, she found herself facing a Working Joe android who belonged to Seegson. Interestingly, the Working Joe barred Ripley from entering the communication center, and Ripley rightly smelled something fishy in the android's behavior and protocol. But she needed to contact her friends. It was indispensable for her, so she snuck through one of the vents and saw a confrontation between between a Sevastopol resident named Hughes and a working Joe. The argument heated up pretty quickly, and Hughes shot the android, who immediately killed Hughes in cold blood by smashing his head. Now, this was absolutely alarming because the prime directive of androids was to ensure human safety, let alone hurt them physically. Somehow, Ripley manages to contact Samuels and warns him of what she has just witnessed, the homicidal working Joes, as well as the alien life that was running loose on Sevastopol. But she was not the only one with information. He told her that Taylor was with him, but she was heavily injured because of the spacewalk gone bad. In fact, she could not be moved in this state and needed immediate treatment, or at least some first aid. He asks her to get some supplies from the medical facility present at Sevastopol before rendezvousing with him and Taylor. During her attempt to reunite with her friends, Ripley discovers a motion tracker as well as the black box from the Nostromo, her mother's ship, which was the sole reason why she agreed to come to Sevastopol. However, she is absolutely broken and despaired to find out that the black box's data was corrupted. She had come far too long to face this kind of disappointment. Nevertheless, there were other things she had to take care of, namely Taylor. She pressed on and was cornered by the xenomorph drone while she was in Sevastopol's medical facility to get aid for Taylor. Interestingly, she also finds an explosive trap, and seeing it as the only way out, she detonates the explosives, which does not kill the xenomorph but certainly drives it away. Eventually, she meets Samuels and Taylor, but they are not alone. Present with them is Marshal Waits, Taylor's initial contact at Sevastopol. Also present was Ricardo, the deputy of Waits. You must have wondered at least once about how exactly the xenomorph ended up in Sevastopol. Well, Waits has the answer. He tells Ripley that the creature came aboard Sevastopol from the ship called Anisadora. This was also the ship whose crew found the Nostromo black box. Taylor is then brought to the Marshal's headquarters, where she was put on life support. Meanwhile, Waits introduces her to Marlowe, the captain of Anisadora, which was the only ship near Sevastopol that could help the survivors escape. However, he was not willing to give the autopilot codes. As a last-ditch measure, Waits sends Ripley to speak to Marlowe. She presses him for information, but in the third episode, he only tells her that he and his wife only found the black box, and not Nostromo itself. But Ripley wants to know more. She knows that he is hiding something, and she is definitely not in the mood to play any more games. Episode 4. In this episode, Marlowe begins narrating his story to Ripley. You see, Marlowe and his crew discovered the Nostromo black box in space. They knew that the ship that the black box belonged to must have been around, so they started looking for it in the hopes of salvaging it. Eventually, they find a beacon that came from a planetoid that looks seemingly unsurveyed and set the Anisadora on the surface. Marlowe, his wife Foster, and crewmates Haste and Meeks had to go on foot to locate the beacon because of a storm that was raging on the planetoid. They eventually find the derelict engineer spacecraft that the crew from Nostromo had also found. They were thrilled at the discovery, and Marlowe wanted to ensure that only he and his team bore the fruit of their discovery. They find the dead engineer, and upon investigating, they come across the hordes of ovomorphs or xenomorph eggs. Finding alien life meant a lifetime's worth of fortunes. This could have turned into the only payday they would ever need, and Foster got too excited, so much so that she got too close to an ovomorph, from which a facehugger came out and attacked. That's all Marlowe tells her, but this changes Ripley's perspective about her mother. More like Amanda's belief that Ellen went after another payday instead of coming home became more firm. Having said that, Amanda did feel broken after thinking about the fate of her mother when she encountered the same monsters. However, she was in the middle of her own troubles. You see, she was orbiting KG-348, and because of this, she was moving toward the dark side of the giant planet, which only meant that she would lose her signal. And yet, she was helpless without an alternative, so she continued sharing her story. Marlowe was not really willing to reveal anything more than he already did. Naturally, Ripley agreed to help Waits with his new plan. This was the only way forward. Both Waits and Ripley knew that till the time the xenomorph was present in Sevastopol, living itself was a challenge, let alone getting out of Sevastopol and going home. They needed to draw the creature out and either kill it or remove it out of Sevastopol. Waits gives Ripley a flamethrower and sends her to meet Ricardo on Systech Spire. Ripley succeeds in luring the creature in and the area is locked down. Unfortunately though, Ripley also gets stuck inside with the xenomorph. She would have died had it not been for Ricardo, who opened the doors. Although it helped Ripley find safety, the xenomorph drone also escaped. Interestingly, Waits did not really care about about whatever happened to Ripley and was willing to sacrifice Ripley if it meant that the xenomorph was taken care of. Anyway, now they had to come up with another plan. Waits devised a backup plan and sent Ripley to the Project KG-348 labs, where she was to lure the creature. She did so, and the cunning Waits locked her here with the xenomorph before ejecting the module with Ripley still inside. Somehow, she managed to escape the xenomorph and found her way to an airlock. She wore a spacesuit and tried to jump back to Sevastopol. Episode 5. The 5th episode begins with Ripley still floating around the gas giant. But then, she notices something glowing amidst the Sevastopol. Well, it was a communications beacon. The first thought that came to her mind after seeing the beacon was that it would dramatically boost the range of her broadcast, so much so that she could send her distress call across the entire sector. But to reach the beacon, she will have to find a way to fix her propulsion. Nevertheless, as her initial story continues, we see Ripley returning to Sevastopol Station through an airlock. Ripley contacts Waits and gives him a piece of her mind for throwing her into space with the deadliest creature known to mankind. However, Waits justifies his actions by saying that her life was but a small price paid to save whatever was left of the station. Of course, Ripley does not second his thoughts and says that she will talk to him in person after reaching the Marshall HQ. Unfortunately, though, she never gets the opportunity to meet Waits because he gets killed by a working Joe android. In fact, all the Joes had gone extremely violent and hostile towards humans because they had been asked by Sevastopol's mainframe named Apollo to protect the specimen at all costs and should consider every other factor secondary. The Joes start killing survivors on sight, and one of the victims was Waits, whom Ripley heard dying over the radio as a working Joe strangled him. When she returns to the Marshall HQ, she finds only Ricardo alive. On the other hand, Marlowe and Taylor were missing. Ripley had to stop this slaughter, and the only way was through Apollo. So she goes to find the mainframe in order to find out what was up, and happened to find Samuels there, who had come to do the same. In order to make Apollo ask the working Joes to calm down, Samuels tries to connect with it, but he is destroyed by the anti-tampering measures of Apollo. However, he does manage to find a way for Ripley to reach Apollo just before going offline. Needless to say, Ripley asks Apollo to do the needful, including the lifting of the communications blackout that Apollo had caused. However, the mainframe denied all her requests, stating that Apollo had been given Special Order 939, according to which protecting the xenomorph is the priority. Furthermore, she learns that Seegson, which created Apollo, had been bought by Weyland-Yutani. So yeah, that explains why the working Joes had gone haywire, as they saw all humans as a threat to the safety of the alien. Ripley tells the computer that the xenomorph was already out of Sevastopol, and that there was no reason for the continued hostility, but her request gets rescinded. As a last-ditch measure, she tried to overload the core of Sevastopol to cause an overload, and by extension, a reactor purge, which would destroy everything down there. However, while she was at it, she got the shock of her life, as she saw more xenomorphs escaping the place and scattering across Sevastopol. Episode 6. Ripley now found herself on the far side of KG-348. Thanks to this, she was now surrounded by absolute darkness. She begins to feel like she would not survive this for long, and the moments of weakness grow tall on her. And she admits that the only reason why she kept on looking for her mother all these years was that if she kept looking, it meant that she had an excuse to be broken. Ripley says that she absolutely hates the world and everything that humans do for their nefarious purposes. Anyway, let's return to our primary story. So after the reactor purge, Ripley learns from Ricardo that the communications blackout has been lifted, just as she had hoped. Now, this gave her the opportunity to contact Marlowe, who was seemingly in the Anisadora. But before that, Ripley learns from Ricardo that Taylor freed Marlowe after he promised her the location of the planet where the xenomorph was first found. When Ripley contacts him, he tells her that he has something for her, and plays her a recording of Ellen Ripley. You see, he had secured the data from the Nostromo's black box. In the message, Ellen addresses Amanda and tells her about her ordeal, and how they had to destroy the Nostromo to stop the creature from escaping or coming to Earth. And Amanda finally learns the fate of her mother, that Ellen did not die on the ship and managed to find an escape pod. However, Marlowe points out to Ripley that he is gonna overlord the Anisadora's reactor to purge the world of xenomorphs, at least the ones on Sevastopol Station. He was basically gonna turn the damn thing into a nuke that would destroy everything in the vicinity. Ripley tells him to reconsider what he was doing, but Marlowe would not budge, claiming that Ellen understood the nature of the risk that the Xenos posed. and that had she been here, she would have helped Marlowe, contrary to what Amanda was doing. Anyway, Taylor, whom Marlowe had double-crossed, was also present with him, and as he was arguing, she knocked him unconscious and tried to stop what Marlowe had started, but she could not, and soon the destruction of the ship began. Marlowe and Taylor die because of the explosion as Ripley runs with her life. Although Anisadora's explosion did not destroy the entirety of Sevastopol, the station was thrown off its orbit as the orbital stabilizers had been damaged. Ripley had promised that she would come back for Ricardo, and she does, only to find out that he had become the victim of a facehugger's ugly kiss. Although reluctantly, she had to leave him behind. Amidst all this, she does manage to get in touch with Torrens, the ship in which she had arrived at Sevastopol. Captain Verlaine tells her that she should hurry and asks her to extend the maintenance rig of Sevastopol so that she could arrive on the Torrens. Ripley follows the instructions to the last word and hurries. Just as she is about to wear her spacesuit, she gets attacked by a xenomorph drone, and that's where the penultimate episode of this awesome digital series ends. Are you ready for the next one? Episode 7. Ripley wakes up trapped in a hive, cocooned alongside corpses of those who gave birth to chestbursters. She escapes and dodges xenomorphs to reach the maintenance area. Verlaine contacts her, revealing the Torrens is docked, but Sevastopol is pulling it down. Ripley suits up and ventures outside to detach the Torrens by blowing the maintenance arm's emergency release bolts. Unseen, xenomorphs stalk her. As Ripley triggers the bolts, xenomorphs attack, but the explosion dislodges them from the station. Sevastopol then descends into KG-348's atmosphere and explodes. Ripley, having secured herself to the Torrens, safely boards. However, she can't contact Verlaine and finds a xenomorph on the ship. Ripley ejects herself and the alien into space to survive. The story loops back to Ripley adrift in space near KG-348. She uses her suit's propulsion to aim for the comms beacon, only to find xenomorphs hibernating on debris along the way. Ripley faces 3 choices: descend into KG-348's atmosphere and burn, drift into space, or navigate through the xenomorphs. She decides to move forward. Luckily, the xenomorphs remain dormant as she passes them silently. Reaching the beacon, she connects and sends out a distress call. Later, a searchlight wakes her as it shines directly in her face. Marvelous verdict. Although the digital series did give fans some closure to the cliffhanger ending of the game, there were several major issues here. For instance, they left out the whole subplot about how and why there were more aliens on the ship apart from the one that came out of Marlowe's wife. It was one of the game's biggest twists, but was left untouched in the series. Additionally, the animation could have been better. Okay, let's forget the animation for a while. They could have done something about that shoddy lip sync. I mean, what was that? Nevertheless, if you are an Alien fan, I want to suggest you watch it. The series could have been way better, but it is not bad. The series captures a similar tension and atmosphere to Ridley Scott's original, using tight spaces, flickering lights, and immersive sound effects reminiscent of the Nostromo. The mix of traditional and first-person camera work heightens the suspense, particularly during xenomorph encounters, making the threat feel immediate and terrifying. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe.